I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street.
What if Michael Jordan played one secret pickup game in summer 1996 to pay off a debt so big it would get him banned from the NBA for life? What if that game was played on a private court in Malta and Jordan's parting gift was a jewel-encrusted pair of Jordan 11s, a pair of kicks so special and rare that they could be worth millions if they actually exist? Follow Jack Palms on a hunt from San Francisco to Hawaii and back across the country to New York City as he tracks the only person who knows the truth about these sneakers, a felon who just skipped his bond to chase them. The mythical pair of sneakers that can only go by one name, the Maltese Jordans. Seth Harwood presents his next novel. Subscribe today at patreon.com/Seth Harwood.
Hey guys, you know how much I love 5-4, which is now Menlo Club. Remember, I've been a member for over 2 years now, and I love them. Well, I got together with the folks at Menlo Club, and they're offering my listeners a 50% off plus a free pair of 5-4 sunglasses when you sign up in May. Menlo Club is great clothes. They come to your door every month. It's $60. That includes tax. That includes shipping. You get to select your sizes, your styles. It's really super easy. And like I said, the clothes are great. So go to menloclub.com, sign up, use the promo code FSP, as in Fascination Street Podcast, and you will get 50% off your first month plus a free pair of 5-4 sunglasses. Thanks, guys. Hey guys, this episode is with Nathan Lowell. He's the writer and the author of the Age of the Solar Clippers series and a couple of other series. He is a science fiction author who writes a little bit outside of the box. I really enjoy his books. I think you will too. And I caught up with him in Austin recently after a failed phone call attempt. So this was sort of a do-over interview, and he was gracious enough with his time to hang out with me for a little bit. And here you go, guys. Enjoy. Nathan Lowell.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah.
Nathan Lowell, thank you for this do-over. I really appreciate it. Sorry about the technical difficulties.
It happens.
But I was fortunate enough to actually meet you in person, so that's way better for me.
Thank you. I don't mind doing the do-over. I know technical difficulties occur.
So you happen to be here in Austin because you're doing an author workshop, is it?
Yeah, it's a writer's workshop. It's about the business of writing and how do you become more proficient, some ideas about how to be more productive. How do you approach your work from a professional business aspect? It's a lot of different definitions of success. So if you want to be successful fiscally, you really need to run your art business as a business rather than as an art. Having a business mindset, even when you're doing art, is really important. And if you talk to any successful artist, anybody who's actually moving product, they all have the same sort of mindset. I think it was Steve Jobs who said, artists ship.
Artists
Ship. You can polish it forever, but until you ship it, it doesn't matter.
So
I think that was Jobs, but I'm not sure.
that makes 100% sense. I'm not an artist, but even with this podcasting thing, I will look up from the clock, and I've been editing a 45-minute podcast for 6 hours.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, and what am I doing? Because I hear podcasts all the time that they don't edit at all.
Mm-hmm.
And they have far more listeners than I do. But my main problem is that ums irritate the shit out of me.
Mm-hmm.
I was editing a podcast this morning, and in 45 minutes between me and the guest, there was 197 ums. I cannot abide that.
I do it, but not as much as some people, I suspect.
You, Nathan Lowell, Dr. Nathan Lowell,
Dr. Lowell, yes.
you grew up in the New England area.
Yeah, I grew up on South Coastal Maine.
A lot of this is going to sound like you've already told me because you have.
I have, yeah.
So you grew up in Maine.
Yep.
So being in that area of the country, boats and the sea is a regular part of life.
A regular part of it.
Not so much here in the desert that is South Texas.
No.
But
not so much on this side of the Mississippi and this side of the mountains.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you grew up in boats and around boats, and then you went into the Coast Guard?
I went into the Coast Guard. Spent 5 years in the Coast Guard. When I graduated from high school, Vietnam was still very hot. It was a very hot war. The Selective Service was very active.
Now, the Selective Service, for those super young listeners, at 18 years old, as a male in America, you have to go, I guess, to the post office now.
And register.
And register for the draft. But there hasn't been a draft since Vietnam.
There's been a draft for a very long time. But in those days, you went in when you were 18 and you signed up. You registered with Selective Service. And every birthday in the year got a lottery number. So when they needed to make a call, an annual call-up, or quarterly call-up, or how often they did it, they ran the list of numbers. So the 365 birthdays for that year got mashed up by a random number generator.
So there was only 365 numbers.
Yeah, there's only 365 numbers. And if your birthday got called, you got called.
Everybody who was born on February 29th was super lucky.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how they manage leap years. It was probably number 1 whenever they had to draft on a leap year or something. I don't know.
Do you remember what your number was?
For several years, it was over 300. Because when you're growing up in that environment, you're looking at the numbers. You know,
right,
when you're 16, you're looking at the number. What my number would have been this year.
Right.
When I was 16, the number would have been like 298.
So every year do they start over?
Yeah, every year they regenerate the number pool.
Okay.
So when I was 16, my number would have been like 290 or something. And when I was 17, my number was like 325. And if your number was above 250, you were usually pretty safe. You think about how many people that really means. 250 of the 365 birthdays.
Right.
Every male born on those 250 days went into the military.
That is insane.
That is a staggering number. Well, when I turned 17, I also graduated from high school because I was a year ahead of everybody.
Good job, man.
Well, no, it was because of my birthday.
Oh.
My birthday fell in that little early fall, late summer period.
Well, when's your birthday?
October 12th.
Let me be the first to say happy birthday.
Thank you.
Usually that's somewhere around Columbus Day, right?
It is. It was originally Columbus Day.
Okay.
Then they made it a Monday holiday.
Yeah, then they made it a Monday.
But I don't know if they've turned it back. I heard lately they turned it back to being Columbus Day again. I don't know.
Who knows? I'm sure that goes state by state.
State by state, yeah, I'm sure it does too. And the degree to which is observed.
Correct.
It's observed much more on the East Coast than anywhere else.
Not so much in California.
Not so much. So at 17, I had graduated from high school, and there were college deferments. So if you were a 4-year college student, you could sometimes get a draft deferment. So even if your number was called, you didn't have to go.
Sort of an exemption.
Yeah, an exemption. They were called deferments, draft deferments. And so I had lined up a couple of schools, and it was like, I felt really bad because they were really expensive. We were not a wealthy family. And the idea that I was going to go to college for something that I was sort of interested in, and it was going to cost a lot of money.
What was your...
I was always interested in computer science. So I was going to go to school.
So back then, computers consisted of giant punch machines.
Yeah. So I got into a couple of pretty decent schools, and you get down to it and you look and you go, are you really going to do this? And I'm like, no. So at 17, I didn't have to register. And the logic flowed from that I've had 2 years in a row where my number was really high. And it doesn't have to be very low for me to get called up. But if I'm enlisted, I at least have... They can't call you because you're already in.
Right, you're already in. And then do you get to sort of pick maybe where you're going to go?
Well, I can pick the service I want. I don't get drafted into the Army.
Right. Okay.
I could join the Navy, I could join the Air Force, and I picked the Coast Guard because growing up on the coast, I'm really familiar with the Coast Guard.
And typically, the United States Coast Guard protects the United States coastline.
Coastline, yeah. A lot of search and rescue, a lot of weather.
So pretty slim chance that they're going to be carting you across the world.
Well, you have to volunteer for vol. There was a Coast Guard presence. They ran the riverboats in the Mekong.
Okay.
And so they were gunboats. They weren't PT boats because they mounted machine guns, but they were basically little gunboats that ran in the rivers along the Mekong. And, there were a lot of gung-ho coasties who, really wanted the battlefield promotions and shit, I guess. They wanted to go and wave the flag or whatever. I was happy running weather. Hey, let me do
running weather?
Weather, yeah. We do weather. The mission for the Coast Guard is, it was law enforcement, fisheries law, boating law, a lot of search and rescue, escort duty for the... what was it? It was the Provincetown to Halifax yacht race.
With your uniform, did you have to wear an ascot?
No, not with a uniform.
No.
Not with a uniform. So I reasoned that if I joined the Coast Guard, I couldn't get drafted.
That's 100% connection.
100% connection. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do anyway. I thought computer science, but the computer science that I saw wasn't really attractive. So I thought, well, okay.
Because computers weren't attractive yet?
Well, computers weren't attractive yet. You know, the idea that you might run a computer on a CRT is only beginning to come into play.
Cathode ray tube?
Yes.
Okay. Look that up, folks.
Yeah, really. It's old school. It was like a television, except not.
And this would have been
1970.
70.
Yeah,
Okay.
1970. And so I went into the Coast Guard, spent 5 years. The enlistment was for 4 years plus 2 in active reserve, but I extended for a year because my last station was Portland Harbor Station, I grew up in Portland just
Maine?
outside Portland, Maine.
Okay.
I was practically at home. I could go back to my mother's house and sleep if I wanted to. I didn't, but I could have.
So that made it 5 years?
I made 5 years of active duty, and
so
then 1
that
year.
puts you at, what, 22, 23?
22,
somewhere around there?
somewhere in there.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I got out of the Coast Guard and had to find a job, and I started working as a data entry clerk for a college bookstore, doing college bookstore book orders. Miserable job, but in those days they were all done by teletype.
Now, what's a teletype?
Teletype is sort of like a computer, except it only does text.
Okay, so everybody who's seen the Robin Williams movie Good Morning Vietnam,
Yeah.
he played a radio DJ.
Yeah.
Every day they would go to the teletype to read the news.
Yeah, it would come off in a big yellow stream.
So those are the machines that you're talking
Yeah,
about.
they go chicka 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 chicka.
Loud as shit.
Loud as hell. And the military versions all ran on tape, they ran 100 words a minute.
Okay.
So there's a little punched tape
Right.
with holes punched in it, and it had a little pin reader that you could put the tape in and turn it on, and once you've got great long weather reports or situation reports, whatever kind of communication you wanted, you could, spend the time to make the report correct, fix the tape when it was bad, and then put the tape in, and it would spool the tape at 100 words a minute. But if you were a good typist, you could type at 120 on them, and it would go. And so that's where I learned to type.
Ah.
It's really, really learned to type.
Would you say that's the greatest skill you've learned? The one that has helped you throughout your life the most?
It's been the most saleable skill I ever took on.
That's a good word.
When I got out, one of the things that I did was I was a Kelly girl.
You were a Kelly girl?
When back in the day, before it was Kelly Employment Services, it was Kelly Girl.
I have absolutely no idea what that is.
It's a office services group.
Like a temp agency?
It's a temp agency.
Okay.
And it was primarily typists because only girls typed.
Right. I've seen Mad Men.
Yeah, okay.
The secretary pool. I know.
Secretary
it was
pool,
only
exactly.
the ladies that typed.
It's
so
only-
you were a Kelly girl.
I was a Kelly girl. And so when I went to the agency, because they're always looking for people, and they went to the agency, and I said, okay, you're looking for typists. They said, well, yes. I said, okay, I'd like to apply for the job. Well, you have to be able to type.
And you also have to sit down to pee.
Well, that's why I don't have any problem with that. But they said, well, you have to type at least 45 words a minute.
And you just started laughing.
I said, okay.
You said, literally, I can do that with one hand tied behind my back.
No. I was still young and trying to get a job because I needed to eat.
Sure.
And so, I'm there. I've got a suit. I've got a sport coat and a tie and slacks. Wasn't wearing jeans or anything. I mean, it was, still with sort of military haircut.
I feel like the dress code might have been for a skirt or a dress.
That was one of the things. But they said, you have to take a typing test. It's on an IBM Selectric. Okay.
Is that an electric typewriter?
It is. It was an old electric typewriter. It had a spinning ball instead of all of the little chicka 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 keys that went in. It had a little spinning ball, and you hit the key, and
Sadly,
it went.
I remember those.
I said, well, normally I type between 100 and 120 words a minute, but on a Selectric, because it's a foreign keyboard to me, it's probably going to slow me down a little bit. I probably can't break 80 words. And they said, well, you only have to type 45. I said, well, okay, well, when do you want to do the test? And she says, when do you be ready? Can we do it now?
You said, I happen to have brought my fingers.
I brought the fingers, yeah. And so they sat me down and they said, okay, here's what you have to type. And we're going to set the timer. When I press the button, start typing. And when it dings, stop. And it was like 3 minutes.
Okay.
And so in 3 minutes, they had to figure out how many words I could type. They would deduct errors.
Sure.
So if you made a lot of errors, they wouldn't take you. And so they hit the bang and and 3 minutes was up and I stopped typing and put my hands up, yeah. They looked at me like, what the hell are you? And they pull a number thing out and they went through and the woman is sitting there. She's got a red pen and she's just waiting.
She's poised.
She's ready. She got to the last character, and the last character was wrong.
Because that bell scared you.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. The last character was wrong. But the rest of it was perfect. And they said, okay, you fulfill the requirements.
So did you get your 45?
I got like 88 or something. And it's like, yeah, okay, fine. We get a call for a typist, we'll call you up. So I would go around town. This is in Portland, Maine. And I would go around town for these typing jobs. And I'd walk in and I'd go to the receptionist where it was. And I said, okay, I'm here for the typist job. And they said, well, we're expecting a Kelly girl.
I'm a Kelly girl.
I'm a Kelly girl. And they're like, what? I'm here to do your typing. Can you type? Yes, I can type. If you would like me to take a test, I'd be happy to take a test. I would be happy to prove it to you, but let me just say, for 5 years in the United States Coast Guard, I was a teletype operator and type 120 words a minute. If you would like me to prove it, I can prove it to you, but otherwise, why don't we just get on with business and you're paying me by the hour. It's your time, it's your dime. So we can either move on or you can continue to ask questions, and I'd be happy to answer them for you. So yeah, I spent a while as teletype as a data entry clerk, and that set me up to be a teletype operator for the bookstore because they were in fall rush and they had to get their book orders out, and they needed a teletype operator because the civilian version of teletypes were produced by Western Union, which used to send messages instead of money.
Like
telegrams.
Telegrams?
Yeah, remember those?
No.
No, I don't either.
I do not.
I don't either.
So Nathan Lowell, stop.
Mm-hmm. That's the one.
Full stop or whatever
Full
they
stop.
said. So when did you decide that you wanted to get into writing?
When I was 6.
6, you say?
Yeah, I wanted to write stories when I was 6 because I started reading when I was 4.
4, you say?
I did say 4. Yeah, and I think it was actually earlier, but 4 I remember. My mother used to claim 3, but I think it was more like 4. I started school when I was 4. I always read above grade, and I always read better than the girls in my class.
Why is that significant?
Because usually in the early grades, the girls read better first.
Interesting.
The data on it shows girls as having more verbal skill, both in reading and in writing early. And I'm not sure if that's genetic or if it's socialization, but
I feel like that in the back of your mind without you knowing it, that might have propelled you to being a Kelly girl. You're like, I'm going to show up these ladies.
yeah, no, I don't think so. But maybe. I wouldn't rule it out, but
I would 100% rule it out.
But I wanted to write stories early on, and I thought that would be fun. And as I got older, I realized that writers work indoors. So generally the environments indoors are much better than the environments outdoors.
Generally.
Yeah.
It's not what I've heard about this hotel.
That
I
hotel
I heard this hotel is freezing.
This hotel is cold, so. But it's not unusual.
Generally, conditions are nicer inside.
So
it's hard to get a sunburn unless you're Ma and Pa Kettle.
Yeah, and it's hard to get a sunburn, and it's really hard to get frostbite.
Again, with the exception of this hotel.
Yeah. Well, that's true. But I won't say lazy, but I like my creature comfort. I don't like being uncomfortable. I don't like being hot. I don't like being cold.
There's a reason that we don't live in caves anymore.
That's probably
not
it.
Because we're lazy.
That's
because
probably
we want it better.
Yeah.
So tell me about storytelling as an art in the New England area.
Oh, yeah. Storytelling it's an oral tradition. It goes way, 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 way back in Maine, and in along the coast and in the lumber camps and wherever people gathered and there was no other entertainment, they spent their time entertaining each other by telling stories. Some would call them lies. We just call them stories.
Fish tales.
Fish tales. And so there's a long oral tradition of Down East storytelling. And Marshall Dodge is one of the most famous of the Down East storytellers. And that's been picked up by a couple of other newcomers. When I was coming up, it was Tim Sample. Well, it was Marshall Dodge coming up, and then in my early adulthood, it was Tim Sample, who was the premier.
Sample. Okay.
Like, yeah, take a sample.
Gotcha.
So Marshall Dodge was killed in a car accident, but he left his trunk of junk to Tim Sample.
Really?
Really, literally, for all intents and purposes, he left his crown as the preeminent Down East storyteller to Tim Sample.
Was he a mentor to Tim?
I don't know. I don't know what the relationship was, but it turned out
clearly
that
they had one.
Almost had
of some sort.
Well, they had to have at least some, because I think Marshall Dodge was Tim Sample's, I won't necessarily say mentor, but certainly his inspiration, his idol.
So Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
So yeah, Down East storytelling, and I always thought that was kind of cool because the Down East stories are really.
How are they different than say?
Tim Sample did a lot of stuff in tourist areas because they wanted people from away wanted to come and listen to Down East stories. And there's a couple things that are different about Downey's
Since that's going
stories.
on, can you just speak up
I can
just
be just a little bit. Yeah, there's something different about Downey's stories. And of course, the first thing that's different is that you have to talk like you're from down east. Now, being here in Texas, I'm taking my life in my hand. But
True. I heard you say pecan earlier.
yeah, I did.
I calmed all the natives down.
Bad upbringing.
Told them you weren't from here and that it was okay.
It was okay.
So you're still good.
He always started his sets when he would do his set at the local bar or whatever.
At the local bar?
Bar, yeah, or whatever. And he would always explain, I'm about to spend about an hour and I'm going to tell you stories. Now, these stories are really funny, but you're not going to laugh because you don't get it. There's a lot of that that's true. I'm trying to think of one that I can tell you so you get a flavor for it.
Oh my God, I love flavor.
Well, I'll tell you the story. This is a true story. This one literally is a true story. My sister Laurie, she used to go up to Grey Corner and drink beer with Percy Tarbox. Now, Percy Tarbox is not his real name, but my sister Laurie, my now late sister Laurie, when she was a teenager, when she was a teenager, she was a hellraiser. And she and my mother used to get into some wicked hollering at each other on Sunday morning, because she'd go up Saturday night. She was like 15, 16 years old. She and Percy Tarbox used to go up to Grey Corner, and they would drink beer. Now, I don't know how Percy Tarbox, because he was underage, I don't know how they got the beer, but they would go and they would drink beer. And she would come home late, and she would be stinking of beer. Sunday morning, she and my mother would get right after her. Well, this went on for, I don't know, months, weeks. One day, she didn't come home. By that time, I'd joined the Coast Guard, and I was away at boot camp, and I got this phone call. In boot camp, you don't get phone calls, but I got this phone call. And I had to go to the office and listen to it. And my mother said, if you see your sister, you let me know. She's been gone for 2 weeks, and we haven't found her yet. She went up to drink beer at Percy Tarbox, and Sunday morning she never came back. And that was 2 weeks ago. We don't know where. So they found her, eventually, about 2 weeks after that, in a jail cell in Alabama. She was in a stolen car.
A stolen what?
Car.
Car.
An old Chrysler Imperial. It used to belong to my grandfather. Cherry car. She and Percy Tarbox went up, got it. The trunk was full of stolen pharmaceuticals, and the back seat was full of stolen merchandise. Oh. I don't know what happened to Percy Tarbox, but my sister Laurie sat in an Alabama jail for 4 days before she would tell anybody what her name was. So they didn't know who to call. Finally, after about 4 days of sitting in the cell, she finally called the name and where she's from. And the sheriff called up my mother and said, so we got this girl here, says she's Laurie. She says she belongs to you, is that right? Yeah, we've been looking for her. She's here, and we'll send her home. We don't have anything to charge her with, but we'll send her home. And after that, my mother and my sister never got in another scrape again. That's a Downey story.
Why is that funny?
Well, I don't know. I don't know that it is.
Okay, so that's a Downey story.
That's a Downey, but that's the kind of story. You hear, these are stories you tell about people you know, things that happen. Downey's terms are sometimes difficult for people from away to understand.
So there's down east and there's away.
Away. Yeah,
okay.
Away. Like people from Connecticut. They're from away.
Okay.
They're not from down east.
Got you.
The definitions of these terms, like gawmy. It's spelled G-O-R-M-Y. Gawmy. It means, there was this kid, and he was pretty gawmy. His father didn't know what he was going to do about it. So sent him to the well.
Send him to the where?
To the well.
To the well.
Because he wanted a drink of Adam's ale. He needed a little water.
Okay.
So he sent him down the well. And there's a long lead up that goes with this, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. But there's a whole long lead up to the different things that this gawmy kid goes and does. And these two guys are sitting on the porch waiting for him to come back with the water. Before long, they go, he doesn't show up. They go back and they look. They find him down in the well.
Down in the well?
In the well. And so one guy turns to the other guy. He says, that's your boy, huh? He says, yeah. Kind of gawmy, ain't he?
So that means...
A bit clumsy. Not particularly lucky. Let me just say, Gerald Ford would have been considered gawmy.
Okay, so Gerald Ford was a president who was a laughingstock because he was so clumsy.
That's the guy.
Chevy Chase played him on Saturday Night Live, and all he did was be Chevy Chase and fall down.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's kind of gawmy. But it applies to everything you do. You go out with a girl and you get her in a family way. It's kind of gawmy.
Got you.
So there's a long story about that. And there's another one about
So
a
that's-
pig with a wooden leg.
So that's like the opposite of Wicked Smart.
That's the opposite of wicked smart.
Okay.
Yeah, you're gaumy or you're wicked smart. Well, you can still be
You can be
wicked
in the
smart.
middle.
You could be wicked smart and gaumy.
Oh, like pushing a door that says pull.
Exactly.
Okay.
So this is long history of Cracker Barrels and lumber camps and fishing camps, ice fishing and hanging out and telling each other stories, telling each other lies, trying to one-up each other. So a lot of the Paul Bunyan stories came from that tradition. Paul Bunyan isn't restricted to New England. Wherever there were lumber camps, you heard stories about Paul Bunyan. Down here, it's Pecos Bill.
How dare you?
Sorry. Those aren't darn Easter, but each region of the country has their own sort of storytelling that they do. And a lot of it is recognized as legitimate storytelling now, wherein before it was just what we did for entertainment. You can't go outside, there's no television, there's no radio, there's 4 feet of snow on the ground. If the 12 of us in town get together at the country store and fire up a potbelly stove, we're not all burning the same amount of wood.
Correct.
So, you go in, you sit down, you spend the evening sitting around the fire at the country store, and then you go home and get into bed fast.
Yeah, sure. It's warm in bed.
It's warm in
gonna
bed.
be.
Yeah, it will be soon. That's the Downey storytelling tradition. I always thought, okay, that's pretty interesting. What makes a good story? How does it work? And I always wrote stories. I had notebooks of things that I hope are moldering in a landfill somewhere.
Sweet.
And I always wanted to write. I always wanted to be a writer. But in those days, before like 2005, breaking in was always the difficult part. The don't quit your day job thing was always the difficult part. You used to be able to make a living as a journalist back before, I want to say 1990.
There used to be journalists.
They used to be journalists. So I wasn't able to I didn't have an outlet until I discovered audiobooks, and I knew that I could write a story, narrate it, and give it away in audio format in an episodic form in audio. There were no barriers to entry.
So, audiobooks.com is where I found you.
Yep.
Is that still around? I haven't
It is.
visited
It's
them in a while.
now Scribble. SCRIBL.com.
SCRIBL.
Yep. Scribble.
And so what audiobooks.com was and Scribble is authors who have written their own content and for the most part are voicing their own content. It's like audiobooks,
right,
but it's audiobooks.
It's audiobooks. Well, Scribble now is actually open much wider. Audiobooks, you had to put it together in episodic format. You had to make all of your audio content available as a podcast episode, however long you wanted to make it. But it had to be in a podcast episode. So there had to be an intro, there had to be an outro, and there had to be a content in the middle. Scribble, I think, now does audiobooks as well.
Okay.
And in audiobooks, you had to give them away on a donation model. So we were always giving them away on a Creative Commons, no commercial, no derivatives, share alike.
And you said that.
Over and over and over.
You said it every episode.
Every episode. Because every episode was licensed under the same license. And so you got to the point after, because I did 75 episodes for audiobooks.
75. Would that be Ishmael Wong stories?
6 Ishmael Wong stories, 1 Tanith Fairport story, and 1 Shaman's Tales, the Otto Krug story.
Okay.
So there were 8 books that I narrated and
So 75 times you had to say that?
I think it was, 75.
And you're recording this at your house?
Yeah.
While the kids and the wife are away?
For the most part. When the kids were young, they would go to bed. And my wife would be in the other room, and she would be relatively quiet. But once the kids go to bed, they're not up running up and down the stairs, they're not flushing toilets, they're not running water. In the evening, we're not running laundry. So it was a little bit easier. My first book I recorded in the front seat of my car.
The first episode of this podcast I tried to record in the front seat of my car. It was the most horrifically bad, loud, it was the worst thing I ever did.
You're not supposed to be driving.
Oh. Well, I thought that since because we had just got a Land Rover, and I was like, this is a cool car. It's a luxury car. It's going to be quiet. It's the loudest car I've ever had in my life.
I had I don't think it was, might have been my Taurus. No, I don't think it was. Anyway, it was very quiet because it was generally parked in the garage with the doors closed.
Not running.
Not running.
Okay, good.
Yeah, not running.
That's how you're here today.
And that's why I'm here today. It worked out pretty well. It was terrible. The audio quality was terrible. I think the reason that it was quiet enough was because I was recording in MP3 at a very low bit rate. So the audio...
What were you recording on?
I had an iRiver 799.
Nobody knows what that is.
I know. It was the same machine. It was the same recorder that Adam Curry used
Oh, okay.
for his mobile rig.
Adam Curry, the Podfather.
The Podfather, yeah, the
Yeah.
guy who really is, sort of the guy who popularized podcasting.
Yeah, I think originally he was a VJ on MTV,
Originally, yeah.
and
Yeah.
then so
And I don't know where he went after that, but he was
Austin.
really.
He came to Austin, and he stayed here for about a decade. I don't know if he's still here, but for a good amount of years, he was doing his thing from Austin.
I know he's flying back and forth between L.A. and Holland, the Netherlands.
Yeah. I thought it was London, but Holland, you're right. It was Holland. It was over there.
It was over there. He might have been going back and forth to London, and his mother-in-law maybe was in Holland because his wife is Dutch.
Gotcha. That makes 100% sense.
And so audiobooks, yeah, that was where I first learned about how to build an audience and where to build an audience, and that I could actually write a full novel
And so how were you building an audience?
one at a time.
I guess my question is, there wasn't Twitter back then.
Yeah,
There was?
yeah.
Really?
2007, yeah.
Okay.
There wasn't Facebook.
There wasn't Facebook.
Well, there was Facebook, but it was college only.
Right. It was the Facebook or something.
Yeah.
I guess you're building your audience just from the listeners of audiobooks?
The strategy that I've named it is Big Frog, Small Pond.
Okay.
And in 2007, there were not as many podcasts as there are now.
There's over 1 million now.
Yeah, and in those days, there might have been 10,000. But there were people who were beginning to twig to the idea. This is when portable MP3 players were beginning to sort of take hold. They were before everybody listened to their MP3s on their phone. Not everybody had an iPhone.
Right. And iPhones were brand new. Hold on one second.
People were beginning to understand that Apple had come out with the iPod. And so there was this portable music player. And so there are all kinds of podcasts out there, music, talk radio, and this unique idea that perhaps long-form fiction could be put together in a podcast format. And people were hungry for things to put in their ears. That sounded better in my head.
That's how I found you, because I was doing mortgage underwriting for a very large bank, and I was bored out of my mind because we're in just this big, giant, nondescript building. We don't see customers. We barely talk to each other because we're so busy. And you can only listen to the same 9 songs so many times.
So many times.
And so I stumbled upon audiobooks, and I found you and a few other people, and it opened my world. Instead of wanting to kill myself on the way to work every day, my drive to work was filled with excitement about what I was going to get to hear.
Here, that day, yeah. And so
thank you very much.
You're welcome. So in those days, people were still thinking, did you have to have an iPod to listen to a podcast? And
I've never been an Apple guy.
yeah.
Dell came out with a Dell DJ, which was their version. Dell's here in Austin. But what I fell in love with was Microsoft came out with their competitor called the Zune.
Oh, I remember the Zune.
I love the Zune so much, and I still have like 7 Zunes, just because the capacity was so much bigger than anybody else.
At the time, yeah.
Well, even still.
The beauty of audiobooks is that it was a very small pond. There weren't many people competing in that market.
So how did you find out about it if it was sort of a fledgling kind of a thing?
I was looking for a way to get high bandwidth content to rural learners because I was working for the National Center on Severe and Sensory Disability.
So back then, yes, there was sort of fast internet, but the more people in an area who were using it slowed it all down.
Well, even worse, a lot of people were still on dial-up.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said a lot of people were still on dial-up.
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 That means it was connected to a modem.
A modem.
And a phone line.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the good connection was 9600. That's 9600 bits, not bytes per second.
9600.
Yeah. You can get
a gig now.
You can get a gigabyte now. Yeah. 1 gigabyte per second.
9600.
Less than 10,000.
So were you teaching, or what were you doing?
I was working for the National Center. I was the technologies director for the National Center on Severe and Sensory Disabilities. And what we were doing was
for severe and sensory disabilities.
Yeah,
okay.
So people who were blind, deaf, or needed significant support need. And I was working with the University of Northern Colorado to create programs to teach the teachers for those kids. So the difficulty is that in those days, and it's still continuing today, is that it's difficult to get those master's level students the certifications that they need for these specialized fields, because you have to go to school to get the certification. You literally need a master's degree. And if you're already a teacher, then that means you have to take this master's program. But you can't take a master's program in another state, except by then, in those days, half the states had closed their programs because they were in such low demand they couldn't support a program that only had 4 students a year.
Got you.
You can't hire and keep 5 teachers, 5 professors employed for only 4 students.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So what was happening was that all of the people who wanted to get these degrees had to close up shop. They had to basically quit their jobs and move to another state for a couple of years to get to a program that they could take. And it was causing a real serious crisis in terms of finding teachers. I started out in Teachers for the Blind.
Why?
Well, that was because the first one was a Western Regional Governors Program, which was a higher ed collaboration across the Western states, excluding California, because you always exclude California.
Hey, they exclude us, man.
The Western Regional Governors Program in Blindness and Visual Impairment was offered as a classroom course at the University of Northern Colorado, but the woman in charge of that recognized that there was a need, because across the region, while the teachers could come and pay in-state rates because of the Western Regional Governors Program, they couldn't, because it was a residential program. They had to basically quit their jobs and come and take the course. And a teacher doesn't get that much to begin with. To give that up in order to go to school, to come back and get a 10% raise later, is not really tenable. And so my master's program, by then I just about finishing my master's program in educational technology there, my interest area was in distance education. So how do we teach people who aren't in the room with you? And all of the different technologies that you can use to do that. In those days, there weren't quite as many. These days, there's too many, and most of them are bad. So my interest was that. And so when I was in my master's program, because I went into the master's program from information systems, I knew what technology could do, and everybody else was in there from education. And of course, they knew what teaching was. But they had some really weird ideas about what computers could do. And so I went in, and we had some serious conversations about distance education with the head of that program. My last course in my master's program, she sat me down and said, okay, we need to get you into the doctoral program. What do you need? And I said, I need a teaching assistantship. I need a graduate assistantship so that I can quit my day job. She said, I can't guarantee what it'll be. I said, I don't care what it is. They have a residential requirement in their PhD program. You have to take 2 full-time consecutive semesters.
Oh my gosh.
And so,
a lot of requirements.
A lot of requirements. In order to satisfy that requirement, I had to be able to quit my day job. In order to quit my day job, I needed some alternate income. And the alternate income, what they were giving out for teaching assistantships wasn't quite the same, but it was enough. So I needed GA, I needed to be a graduate assistant. And she put me into the special ed group. This other person and I, who was in the other doctoral program with me, we were both working in distance education. And we created award-winning, cutting-edge distance education programs that just broke every rule and worked. And so we worked with Portland School of Optometry, we worked with UMass Boston, we worked with Cal State LA, we worked all across the country with all these programs that still existed and wanted to follow our model. And we expanded the model out of blindness, because her specialty was blindness. We expanded the model to deafness and significant support needs. I worked 13 years for them. But this problem with high bandwidth content to rural students. So we had, one of the problems was that we had like a student in Juneau enrolled in our program. She wasn't in Juneau. Where was she? Homer, Alaska.
And you're in?
We're in Greeley, Colorado.
Okay.
And so we have this student. And in our program, you had to come to campus for one. It actually turned out to be for 2 courses, and we ran them in the summer. And so there were 2 courses that you couldn't really digitize. One was very physical. You had to teach them how to use a cane.
This is for the blind students.
For the blind students. You had to be able to teach a student how to use a cane. And so you would blindfold the sighted student and give them a cane and show them how to do the things that the people who are blind have to do in order to navigate, because they need to teach people how to do it, which means they have to know how to do it first.
Gotcha.
So This
That sounds wildly fascinating.
it's not something that you can teach online, because you have to have somebody to pull them back from the curb when they start to step out in front of a car.
Correct.
And how you teach people not to step out in front of a car, and how to recognize when the traffic light is in your favor. When
because
you can't
back then they didn't make the noise that they're making right now.
Right. And one of the reasons they make the noise is because of the work that we did.
Good job.
We changed the world.
Well done,
We
man.
really did.
That's really
And
cool.
That was why I was willing to take academic pay, because it was just such gratifying work. I was looking at podcasting to do the delivery for the digital content and all the rest of that.
Because then they could download that overnight
While they slept.
Okay.
And then they would
Because
have...
it took forever. You kids don't understand.
Yeah, it took forever.
It took forever.
One half decent porn picture
Uh-huh.
could take a half an hour. You know, trying to get audio out.
You're really not in the mood by then.
No, or you're past it.
You are past it. The mood has gone.
Yeah. Well, that escalated quickly.
A third of a beer, and look at you go,
Look at
man.
me go, yeah, no kidding.
So tell me about why you decided to write. That's what we're here to talk about, is
Yeah.
your writing. Your writing is so spot on and so entertaining yet educational. I learned so much from Ishmael Wong. It's ridiculous. So
So-
tell me why you started writing these books.
Okay, I started writing these books because I wanted to see how podcasting worked, which is why this whole big lead up happened, why I was interested in podcasting. And I figured the best way to learn how to podcasting worked was to do it. And audiobooks meant that I could do that thing that I always wanted to do all my life, which was be a writer, a science fiction author, and use that, what I gained from learning how to do the podcast with my own fiction, because anybody can do it, to determine how I would apply that technology in the educational setting. And so originally, I'm there for two reasons. One, I always wanted to be a writer. Two, I had this need to figure out this technology so that I might be able to apply it for my day job. So I wanted to know, can I finish a novel? Because at that point, I'd already finished a book. I'd finished a 300-page dissertation.
What's the difference between a book and a novel?
Well, a book is a book. There are nonfiction books. I wrote a 300-page dissertation, and it was published as a book. A big damn book.
An inch thick book.
An inch thick book. And, hardcover, graphs, tables, charts, a doctoral dissertation. It's a big book. And it took a couple of years for me to get it together. Up at that point, I had never been able to finish a full novel. I read really fast, so I really like to read novels. I really like to read novel series, because I can go through a novel really quickly, which means I need something to read next. And so get invested in a series, then I've got 3 or 4 books. I don't have to look for somebody else for maybe a week.
Right.
Instead of...
Plus, once you really get into a universe or a world,
Yeah,
and you're into it, you kind of want to stay there.
you want to stay there.
I'm sure it's the same, whether it's just one book in a series or the last book of a series. That last half of the book, you're a little bit sad that you're saying farewell to these people in this world.
Yeah, exactly. And so when I started, I didn't think it was going to be a series. I thought it was just going to be a standalone book.
What was your first book? What is this book that you're talking about?
Quarter Share.
Quarter Share.
Quarter Share was my first completed novel.
Dude, you knocked it out of the effing park with Quarter Share.
Well,
It's so good.
I'm old school marketing. My undergrad degree is business administration with a minor in marketing. And so back in those days, 1992, marketing was what you did before you had a product to sell.
Okay.
Marketing was what you did to determine what product you were going to choose, what market you were going to participate in. And so there was a lot of market analysis. What can you sell? You do an analysis of what your skills are, what your tools are, and where that might apply somewhere in the market,
Okay.
the wider market. And so for me, it was science fiction, and it's novel. So I'm going to write science fiction, and I'm going to write a novel, because I've been reading science fiction since I was 5 years old.
You grew up in storyteller land.
I grew up in storyteller land, and I love the novel form. Short stories are just too hard. Short stories, it's really difficult for me to write a good short story. I can write a novel in less time than I can write a good short story. And I can sell a novel for a lot more than I can sell a short story for.
If you can even sell short stories.
Yeah, you can, but it's the short story market is actually pretty good right now if you're self-publishing them as collections.
Okay.
So you put 3 short stories together, sell for $2.99. Okay, fine, that's fine. People who like short stories will buy it. There are short story markets out there. There are more now than there used to be after the magazine business sort of coalesced.
Okay, guys, so a magazine is a Just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't blame you. So I determined that I was going to be a science fiction novelist, and I always liked space opera.
Did you say space opera?
Yes, space
Okay.
opera. It was the derogatory term.
So like Flash Gordon?
Yeah, that it was not Hugo Gernsback, but it was some fan in Hugo Gernsback's original.
Now, is he the Hugo that the Hugo
He's the
Award is
Hugo,
named
yeah.
after?
He was
Okay.
a famous editor back in the 50s, and in those days there were a lot of people coming out with pulp science fiction.
Pulp.
Yeah, and
P-U-L-P.
P-U-L-P, pulp. There were a lot of pulp writers who just churn out book after book after book after book, and they were in all kinds of genres.
How would you explain pulp?
Pulp was generally really short, really action-packed stories. They weren't real long, but they were in 40, 50,000 word range.
Okay.
They were cheap. They were called pulp because they were printed on pulp paper.
Gotcha.
So the paper quality was really low. The ink tended to run. If you got one that was
'Cause they're-
real
like
new,
you
you
said,
could
they're
smudge
just
it.
churning this
You're
shit
just
out.
churning this out, and they're selling tons of it. And the preeminent pulp writer is a guy named Lester Dent, who wrote crime stories. Well, he wrote all kinds of crap, but he wrote primarily crime stories. Anyway,
Okay.
pulp story. It's why pulp fiction is where the title came from, is because they're talking about this very pulpy kind of story that they were telling in pulp fiction. The old guard, science fiction, the real science fiction people, looked down on the sci-fi people because sci-fi was like hi-fi, and soap opera was coming into being, and so there were soap operas, there were horse operas, Western stories,
Like
horse-
Louis L'Amour and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Ish.
I think ish. Louis L'Amour is probably a little bit better than the standard fare,
Gotcha.
but there was a side-by-side space opera where they took a guy on his horse and he pulled out his 6-gun and he shot the Indian or whatever it was, and side by side with that was a guy in his rocket ship and he gets out with his laser and shoots the alien. And it's like, this is crap. This is just not useful. And so they labeled it space opera after soap opera and horse opera and just lowbrow, pulpy entertainment. It wasn't
Gotcha.
the real science fiction of ideas and ideals and all that crap. And so it was really a derogatory term in the original, but it's been adopted now as sort of any story about an individual or group of individuals that takes place against a backdrop of an interstellar civilization. It's separate from near Earth, where it has to be in the solar system. There's been a lot of overlap between space opera and military science fiction,
Okay.
because when you think about a story set against an interstellar civilization, there has to be a war. And so if there's a war, that's a story you can tell, and it quite frequently gets classified not as, well, in addition to being classified as military science fiction, it's quite frequently classified as space opera. But I thought there had to be other stories that you could tell that involved an individual or individuals that takes place against a backdrop of an interstellar civilization. I knew I couldn't out-Weber David Weber. I'm not going to come up with the next Honor Harrington. I'm not going to out-Drake David Drake or John Ringo. I can't do those people, and there's no point for me because they already exist. So I thought, well, what are the stories that I would like to read that I can't find?
So from the old school thought of make the art you want to see in the world.
Right, exactly. And so I thought, okay, if I look at the last 20 years of science fiction, the main characters are captains, they are rich. I think of the Deathstalker series. Or they're like a hidden prince.
Sure.
So they're almost always people with agency. They're people who are in charge of their lives in significant ways that most people aren't.
They get to dictate.
They get to say what's going to happen, even if they're working against some alien or being or whatever.
Sure.
But Captain Kirk is in charge of the story. Captain Kirk drives the story. Picard drives the story. And I thought, well, they're all military. They're either Navy or some kind
How
of Air
else do you
Force.
get the authority to
Exactly.
dictate?
To dictate.
As you rise up, you have rank.
You have rank. And so it occurred to me, we're going to go interstellar. That's going to be expensive. Where do we get the money? And so, well, what if instead of frigates, what if we sent freighters?
What's the difference?
Frigate is a warship,
Ah,
and a freighter is a commercial vessel. So what if instead of sending warships out, what if we sent
shipping ships.
shipping ships? Well, what if we sent explorers out to find resources that we could monetize?
Okay.
So companies have an incentive to do that because they make more money, and they've got money to begin with. so they can make an investment, and they can afford an investment, and they don't have to answer to pesky voters or be dictators. So if we don't send the military, if we send companies, what does that look like? What does that interstellar civilization? And the other thing that occurred to me at the same time was, what did the red-shirted crewman do before he got tapped for the away team? And who took his job afterwards?
Because you know he didn't come back.
Well, he didn't come back, and HR didn't send a replacement.
Yeah, it'd be years before a replacement got there.
Well, yeah, five-year mission, it's going to be a while.
It's going to be a while.
And so, can we tell stories about heroes who are people who are heroic not because they're the captain, but because they're not? So, a single mother holding down 3 jobs so that she can keep food on the table and a roof on her head is heroic. Not necessarily a person with a whole lot of agency.
Correct.
So, how do we spin that? And the first thing we have to do is we have to have somebody relatively young with no skills, no trade.
Because they haven't developed anything.
They haven't developed anything yet. They can't have really a whole lot of agency, and they have to be at the mercy of a wider world. That's a classic Heinlein juvenile start.
Sure.
So, in true Disney form, I made him an orphan by killing his mother before the story started, and he has to figure out a way to make a living. No skills, no job, and he's about to be deported, and if he gets deported, he's going to be stuck with a big bill because they're going to charge him to ship him away.
Where did you get the name Ishmael?
I wanted to start the book with Call Me Ishmael.
What?
Yeah!
Call me Ishmael.
Call Me Ishmael. I wanted it to be Call Me Ishmael. Call Me Ishmael, yeah, I know, but that's really, in this case, it's really my name. And so that first paragraph, it took me a whole minute and a half.
Oh.
The whole first paragraph of that was like, Call Me Ishmael, yeah, I know, but in this case, it's really my name. And some literary allusion to 2 Years Before the Mast with Richard Henry Dana, and really setting the stage for this is not going to be your normal space opera. We're not going to talk about the military. We're going to talk about 2 Years Before the Mast. We're going to talk about commercial shipping. We're not going to talk about military. So that whole first paragraph just blasted onto the page, and I just tried to type fast enough to keep up with it. It was wonderful. It was terrific. That first book took me, first draft was 78,000 words and I want to say it took 7 days.
7 days?
Yeah.
7 days.
Days.
Well, I tell you what, man, you and God can do a lot with 7 days.
7 days. I mean, it was 10 days. So I'm not as good as God.
Stick with 7.
I think it was 10.
But he rested on the 7th
Well,
day.
I think it was 10 because 2 days later I had a second draft.
Oh my God.
And then I had to write a third draft because my beta reader said, there's not enough spaceship here.
Okay.
I had to go back through and do a pass for setting. You know, everything he did could have been on a school bus.
Gotcha.
So I went back through and added things like suit drills.
I think that's one of the things that makes it such a compelling story is because, yes, it takes place on a spaceship, but it didn't have to take place.
It didn't have to. I get a lot of complaints about that because, you know, this story could be anywhere.
That's what makes it so great is that it's not confined to, for lack of a better term, space nerds.
Yeah.
This book is for everybody. I'm not a huge Star Wars fan. I'm not a huge Star Trek fan. I didn't find Firefly until way later.
Yeah.
But these Ismail Wong stories on the Lois McKendrick, phenomenal.
When I first started him, I Googled Lois McKendrick to see if she was somebody famous. No hits.
So where did you come up with the name?
Just made it up.
You just made it up and then
pulled
you
it out
sort
of my ass.
Proofed it to see if it was out there.
Yeah, yeah. And so I wanted to be a woman's name, and I wanted to be somebody who was important in labor movement, actually, turns out. Because the original Lois McKendrick, in the future, it turns out to be one of the people who helped break the hold of the corporate monolith to break up. Because the models at this point now, corporate planets are company towns, and the freighters are clipper ships. They just happen to use a different wind and sail in a different sea.
Sure.
And so
the Solar Clipper.
Yeah.
Fucking genius.
So I have these sort of very relatable ideas that
I mean, it translates so well.
Well, and because I built it to translate that way. And using those as models that people kind of get a grip for made it really easy for me to sort of, okay, what would this look like if it were developed by corporation? Well, what was here when we developed the West by corporation?
You know, it's really funny. When you wrote these books, we still had NASA.
Yeah?
We kind of don't now.
I know.
That has turned corporate.
Yeah. Well, you know what we do have now?
SpaceX.
Solar sails.
Oh, see? Check you out. You should have trademarked every word in those books. So now we have SpaceX, we have Elon Musk, we have Virgin Galactic.
Yeah, we have companies exploring outer
companies.
space. Yeah.
Sort of in the same way that like Wells Fargo got started as an Old West type of deal.
Yeah. Wells Fargo was a cargo delivery
They
company.
were a cargo delivery. So How many books are there, and how many series are there?
Okay.
And how do they work out? How
Okay.
do they correlate?
There are the Ishmael Wong stories, and right now I have 2 series featuring Ishmael Wong. The first books are the shares. People call them the share books.
Quarter share, half share,
Quarter share, half
full
share, full share,
double
double share, captain share, owner share. So there's 6 shares because that's the pay grades. That's the progression in pay. So you move, as you gain more responsibility on the ship, you get more money. So those are the shares. And those are the Trader's Tales. So the formal name of the series is the Trader's Tales. Well, that series ended with owner's share and Ishmael in something of a dilemma. Because while he started the series in a dilemma, he also sort of ended the series in a dilemma. He went ahead and became successful in financial terms, but he finds himself at the end. Well, I'm not going to spoil.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But because of that, that opened the door for me to continue Ishmael Wong stories. This is about the time when something unfortunate happened to Harry Potter. And my fans said, you can't do that. And I really didn't want to, because there were still stories that I wanted to tell. And I wanted to tell them with Ishmael, because I really want to explore the idea that you don't have to be 20 to have an adventure. That you don't always make all of your decisions and then live with them for the rest of your life. You have to keep making them every day. And so Ishmael is in a position where he has to keep making decisions every day after spending 20 years in a position where he pretty much thought he had made his decisions already, and then life happened. And so the next series are the Seeker's Tales. And the Seeker's Tales pick up a few months after Owner's Share ends.
So the next series is the Seeker's Tale.
The Seeker's Tales. And they feature Ishmael Wong. This is all set in the universe of the Golden Age of the Solar Clipper. So it's still Solar Clippers, it's still Ishmael Wong. I bring back some of the old fan favorite characters, and they form a new company, and they go off in search of a new adventure. But they're looking for something. On the surface, they're looking for one thing. In actuality, they're looking for something else, because that's how you do it. And so I've got one more that I have to write. The first 2 Seeker's Tales are published and are out in ebook. I don't think I've put the last one in paperback yet.
I love that you have so many books, you can't keep track of what's published
I have
where.
a whiteboard with
You
a
would
grid
have to.
keep track of them.
You would have to.
It's on Audible, it's on ebook, it's on Kindle, but I haven't got the paperback out for the second book in the second series, in the first trilogy for Ishmael Wong.
I was going to ask, so all of the
First
share
shares,
books,
they're a series, they're a 6-book series. Although in actuality, they're
are they available in print?
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're all available in print. You can get them in print, you can get them in ebook, and they're available on Audible. I didn't do the Audible.
You did the audiobooks
I did.
version, but not the Audible version.
Not the Audible version.
Where are these available? Are they on Amazon?
They're on Amazon.
Okay.
I'm all in with Amazon, so all of my stuff is available on Amazon in whatever forms are available. It's on Amazon.
Click through the Amazon banner on my site, get all of these books.
There you go. That's Ishmael Wong. In the same universe, in the Solar Clipper universe. So far, a standalone called South Coast that is set on one of the planets, because I wanted to show what it looked like to live on a planet and to have to stay within the corporate strictures. And I wanted to tell the backstory of one of the characters that joins the crew of the Lois McKendrick in Half Share. The fans were really interested in this idea, so I wanted to tell her backstory. I did it as a NaNoWriMo project, and I started too soon and wound up telling her father's story.
Explain that project. That's where you have to write so much in an amount of time?
Yeah, 50,000 words in a month. If you can write 1,667 words a day for the month of November, then you win NaNoWriMo, which is bragging rights, basically. But you've written a 50,000 word, maybe novel, in a month, which is a good week for me. Or used to be a good week for me. Right now, it's not so much.
You gotta be tapped out by now, dude. Come on.
I got other conflicts that
That's
I'm not going to get into because it's
don't.
boring. So I've got one more book. South Coast is the Shaman's Tales. There's going to be 2 of those, because now I've got to fill in the hole between the father's story and the daughter who goes off to join the crew. But I got to fill that in, and I got to write that. I got 30,000 words into that. I know what I've got to do. I just don't want to do it yet. But because there's a gap, a chronological gap between Double Share and Captain Share, because to be a captain, you have to be a member of the officer corps for a certain number of years.
Okay.
So there wasn't a different share in there, so I couldn't put another share book in. So there's this chronological gap between when he gets out of the academy and his first job out of the academy and the time when he takes on the mantle of captain. And so in that gap, I'm writing a trilogy called The Smuggler's Tales that has a completely different cast of characters. And so I'm working on the second book in that series, and it's just been a bitch. It's been a year I've been working on this one damn book, and I'll write 1,000 words.
So is this still going to be Ishmael Wong?
Well, it's not Ishmael Wong. It's a different set of characters.
Just totally different.
Totally different. It's a pair of women.
Interesting.
So there's a hotshot engineer, and her wingman is, by the book, Fleet, daughter of a rich corporate magnate. They were roommates in the academy at Port Newmar, and something happens to them on graduation day, and they wind up getting on, this engineer's happens to be, she happens to own her own little scout ship that her father gave her to take to the academy.
Nice.
And so she has this little ship. And so it's an antique, literally an antique. It's one of the original exploratory scouts. It would be sort of like inheriting a Model A.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, so this is the beginning of the whole expansion of the Western Annex, and she happens to have one. But getting parts for it is a bitch.
Gotta be, right?
Gotta be. But she's been tinkering with it. She keeps it, she has it in the cheapest hangar on the orbital upstairs, and so on the weekends she goes up and works on it. So she has a ship available, and they escape and go to the dark side. They go to the part of the Western Annex that nobody in the Ishmael Wong world has seen yet. They go to toehold space. Because when you think about it, how do people get to where Ishmael Wong was? Because this is very organized, it's very regulated, it's very clean, it's very effective, all of those things. But that's not where people start.
Definitely not.
It's not where people start. So there had to be an infrastructure there to support that construction. In the West, those are now ghost towns. In space, they still are populated. But because they're not part of the organization, they're sort of ignored. And so this gives me a chance to look at CPJCT, the Confederated Planets Joint Committee on Trade, from the other side.
Do it again.
Confederated Planets Joint Committee on Trade. Every once in a while, somebody will complain about being the Confederated Planets Joint Committee on everything. Because it's in charge of everything. Because it's run by, not by a government. Like, why don't they rebel? Who are you going to rebel against? How do you rebel against the FAA? There's nothing to rebel against. There's nothing to push against. There's nothing to fight. You can't go out there and fly your own plane.
Right.
Well, once, maybe.
Yeah, one time.
One time.
You can do it once.
That's not a sustainable model. So making this place on its surface kind of utopian, but really when you begin to look at it, it's not necessarily as utopian as it really looks. It works very well for what it does, but people are odd, and there are people who fall through the cracks, and there are people who want something other than a well-regulated environment. And so toehold space allows that to happen. And from one perspective, CPJCT ignores it and pretends that it doesn't exist, which means you can't trade with them because you can't land a cargo that doesn't have the proper provenance, which is a big deal through the series.
Right.
Which is why you can't have smuggling, except there is smuggling, except there are all of these other things that happen that aren't part of the approved narrative. And so Smuggler's Tales gives me the opportunity to begin to break into that. And that's where Ishmael Wong's second series comes in. It's where the Seeker's Tales have to go to find their answers. So yeah, there's that, and then there's the Shaman's Tale. That's the fantasy. So I've written the first book in Smuggler's Tales. First book is Milk Run. That's out. It's out in audio and ebook, but not on paper. There is no paperback version for South Coast yet. I wrote that my first year. I wrote that in 2007, but I haven't got the paperback out yet. In Ashes Born, To Fire Called, and By Darkness Forged are the three books in the Seeker's Tales, and the first two of those are out, but the third one I still have to write. And I'm probably going to write the three Smuggler's Tales, Milk Run, Suicide Run, and Home Run, before I do the last book of Ishmael Wong. I need to get that storyline wrapped up.
I have no words. Like, if I could write a complete sentence, I would be over the moon. And here you've written, what are we at, 13 books? How are you not, like, just revered G.R.R. Martin style?
Nobody knows.
Because nobody knows.
Nobody knows. I have a really rabid, small, and enthusiastic fan base. Like, I have 3 more books besides. So we're at 13 books. I'm writing number 14 now. The fantasy was fun. I want to get back to the fantasy, but I don't know when I can because the science fiction is so demanding.
So demanding.
So I have to get it out.
Right. So as we're winding this down, what does the future look like for you as a writer and these series of books?
Well, I'm going to finish these 2 trilogies.
By the end of this year?
Oh, yeah. I'm 65. I really don't want to be that close to the edge.
Right.
Because, I may lose my hands and, something could happen. I could get Alzheimer's or something and have to stop writing. I don't want to stop writing ever, as long as I can get wheeled up to the keyboard.
That's what you don't even need a keyboard as far as I'm concerned. You can be laying in bed, talk to texting. Just keep writing.
Keep writing. I plan to keep writing. I never want to retire. What I'm doing is, it runs from totally exhilarating to absolutely aggravating, completely depressing, but I never want to stop doing it. So yeah, we're going to do this as long as I can. I still have Ishmael Wong stories that I want to tell beyond what I have on the table. I want to get back to the fantasy stories and start telling more stories about Tanith Fairport and what it's like to be post-change, to be an older person and having to make life decisions. Most people, when they're young, they think, well, I'm going to make my decisions and then life will be good and I'll live my life and everything will be fine. And then as you get older, you discover that, no, I still have to make another decision. The log line for Tanith Fairport's Ravenwood is, you're never too old to make a bad decision.
There you go. And I was going to say, I feel like the older you get, the harder and more important some of those decisions become.
Yeah. And for me,
you don't really have a whole lot of time to course correct.
No. At that point, you're really close to the ground.
All right. So tell everybody where they can find you.
NathanLowell.com.
And on Facebook?
Yeah.
He's like, I guess.
I don't post much on my public Facebook. I have one profile. You can find me on Nathan Lowell, and it's the guy with the beard. It's not the baseball player or the high school basketball guy.
Not those guys.
Not those guys.
Okay.
It's the old fart with the beard. That would be me. But I have a fan group called the Golden Age of the Solar Clipper. Not surprisingly, that was started by a fan, and which I participate in on a regular basis. And so you can log in there and find other fans, and quite frequently I stop by and throw another log on the fire and keep things moving.
Nice.
And you can find other things from there. But NathanLowell.com has pretty much all of the links to everything that I do. My daily walk, Talking on the Morning Walk, TOMMW. It has links to solarclipper.com, which is kind of defunct because I put everything on NathanLowell.com now. LamasWood.com. They're all links all there. You can find my Twitter handle. I'm on Twitter at @nlowell. If you look at my Twitter stream right now, it's pictures of the same tree day after day after day. On March 22nd, it will be my 7th anniversary of pictures of that tree on a daily basis.
How are you managing that when you're out of town?
I don't do it when I'm out of town. What I call it is the first word in my somewhat daily podcast. I walk 2 miles a day for health. And so the first mile I walk. The second mile I turn on my phone and record. And then when I get home, I post it. Now, I have ADHD, and I quite frequently get home and forget to post it. Between the time I walk through the door and take off my boots, I have forgotten that I have to post this audio file.
Makes sense.
When I walk out the door and I start my walk, I take a picture of the tree. And I post a picture of the tree on both Google Plus and Twitter with a weather report. Usually temperature, sky conditions, anything.
You're not wrong.
Rain. When I post that, it tells the fans that I'm out walking. And so if I forget to post, after a couple of hours, if the file doesn't show up, they nudge me.
Oh, that's awesome.
But there's no link. There's no explanation. There's nothing that's going to alienate people. It's not an advertisement. It's this one tree, #TOMMW. So people will ask me once in a while, what the hell is this thing? First word of my daily podcast. I'm over 3,000 miles.
Fantastic.
So 1,600 and something episodes
Good
of the
on you,
daily
man.
podcast over 7 years.
That's really cool.
I'm trying to increase the percentage. It's running about 60% of the days there's a podcast. Over 7 years, it's about 60%.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I won't have one, of course, while I'm here in Austin. But
Thank you again, Dr. Nathan Lowell.
thank you.
I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me again.
Again.
And I can't stress enough how much I love Ishmael Wong and the work that you've done with and through him. And, like I told you last time, I can't drink a cup of coffee without thinking about Ishmael Wong and how this coffee could probably be a little bit better.
A little bit better. Thank you. Thank you very
So
much.
thank you so much.
Hey guys, if you like what I'm doing, rate and review the podcast on iTunes and wherever else you're getting the podcast. And if you do order things from Amazon, it would really help me out if you use that Amazon banner that's on the website at fascinationstreetpod.com and just click through whenever you're buying stuff from Amazon. You can click through the first time and then save that to your favorites or bookmark it, and every time you use it, you don't have to go to the website to get there. I appreciate it, guys. Enjoy. Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2014 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is Apollo from the 2001 album Into the Known by the band Sapphire. Thanks for hanging out with us and getting to know a little bit about our guest. We'll see you next time on Fascination Street.